friendly response. And it was just kind of like overwhelming at first. And it took me a minute, and I'm going to say this one thing. The most profound thing that I've ever experienced, I mean, basically, I think in my life, was I was working through the, I went to pulmonary, I went to the School of Pulmonary Function, and I was a civilian, but I was taken in, and because of my lightheartedness and, I was gregaric, I was bubbly. And they took me in and said, we can train you to become a therapist, and we can train you we want you to sterilize our equipment. And they trained me, it was a black young man and two young white lady and a white guy. They trained me to the point that I got a job. I got a job at Suburban Hospital right across from the campus of Navy. And I was going about my business, and they had me training nurses for respiratory there. And I would work, and I went to the CCU. And I went in to give this white gentleman a treatment. And I went in his room, and he said, "Hey, what are you doing in here?" I said, "Whoa, whoa, 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 whoa. What's wrong?" He said, I said, "Well, I'm sorry. You don't have to take the treatment. I don't have to be here." And I moved back. I was just kind of floored that he said that. He called me the N-word. I was like, ugh. And I told the people, he doesn't want the treatment. And lo and behold, his doctor gave him the Ride Act, and I came back because I was really the only person giving treatments during the day, literally.
Yeah.
So I went back, and he said, "Well, my doctor says," I said, "Look, I'm just here to give you the treatment. We don't have to be buddies or anything. It's okay." And I gave him the treatment. He started getting better, and one day they had a code blue. I ran to the room, and he was in cardiac arrest. Now, this guy had cardiomegaly, so he had a really bad heart. So he was doing really bad. I took my resuscitating mask, and we put on him, resuscitating him. And they were doing cardiac, chest compressions. And we got his heart to function, again. Took the mask off him. We was going to put a non-rebreathing mask on him. He looked up, and he saw me. Now, you got to understand, there are chemical, psychological, and physical changes when you're in CO2 narcosis, you're having problems. He looked at me and screamed like I had pushed him off a cliff. Ah! I said, "Oh my God." His heart went doof, doof, doof. I went to put my mask over his face. He grabbed it, and he held it, and he clutched it, and I couldn't get it out of his hand. And we were wrestling, and he died. I said, "Whoa." I was in shock. I was like, "Oh my God." And I was so obsessed with trying to help him. I pulled it out of the clutches of his hand. And everybody was looking at me, and I'm looking at them going, "Oh my God." I was crushed. I was saying, damn, I couldn't save him. He wouldn't let me save him. And that's when it hit me. Through all of the CO2 narcosis, all the confusion, he had deep inside such a fear that I was the devil. I was going to do something to him, or whatever has caused his thought process to be the way it was. He ultimately feared that I was going to kill him, and he died from it. And I'm going, I was angry. I was so angry at first. And I'm going like, I thought about it, and I said, why am I so angry? This guy died, and I'm being childish about it. And I had to gather myself because I said, oh, I'm hurt because he wouldn't let me help him. I said, oh, maybe this is what I'm going to have to think and deal with as time goes on, because I'm not accepted. And it took me that time to realize I need to be very careful how I talk to people, how I approach them, and it gave me my challenge. My challenge from that point was to disarm all racial, all difficult people that had any pretext of what they thought black people were, especially me. I became the ambassador of, I'm going to change your mind.
Yeah.
And I mean, I went down to Children's Hospital. I worked there for a long time. I met people from West Virginia with Rocky Mountain spotted fever babies, and he was crying. And, oh God! I said, what's wrong? He said, I don't want no N-word touching my child. I said, that's your worst problem? I said, sir, we won't let any of those people touch your child. He looked at me. I said, calm down, calm down. I said, I can believe it. We worked on that child. I worked on that child, worked with that child. That child became my kid. She said, oh, Michael. She grabbed me and held me. And one day, after she got better, Mom had her. She reached up and grabbed me, Michael. And I gave the baby to the mom and said, it's okay. It's okay. Those were the times that made me feel like it filled me with such love and the ability to be able to do something about, a little something about racism, or a little bit about children and touching down and getting something done. In fact, a little blonde kid at the children's hospital, I would make stories up and tell them stories, and the little kid he said, Mister, he said, where can I get that book? My mommy would buy that book. I like that book. I said, that's not a book. I just made that up. He said, you should write book. I said, I started writing children's books from that particular day.
What years were those?
This is 1972. That's the first book, Little White Chest, that I wrote. And I've written many books and poems and, oh, God.
So to summarize your story up until this point.
Yes.
You grew up in Cherry Hill.
Yep.
Which was a segregated area, predominantly black and African American.
There were Filipinos.
Yeah.
There were Hispanics. There were different people, but the majority of people were black.
Well, African American. So you didn't encounter racism until you became an adult.
I was 22 years old.
Yeah.
22.
And